and line of duty deaths are at record highs in our profession. It's a tragedy any time that someone loses their life in this city, whether they're killed, they're injured. Our officers are on the streets every single day doing a dangerous job while trying to prevent harm and protect the innocent. As I stated, it is a tragedy when anyone loses their life. We have not forgotten about the families of those involved on both sides of these issues, but we are very glad that for 7 officers, 6 Oklahoma City officers, and the 7th in the village, that the nightmare of the last 2 years of having to endure this, according to the district attorney today, is over. I'll take any questions.
I know that the DA in her release talked about that they had a use of force expert who provided some insight to the team that reviewed it. Can you talk about the things that an expert such as that might be reviewing, or the things that they went back and looked at and did to come to that conclusion?
Well, I don't want to speculate too much. I did hear Ms. Behenna mention that this gentleman was from California. Of course, laws can be different in certain states, but ultimately, the Supreme Court has kind of set the standard of what is reasonable force by an officer, or justified force, and that's what would a reasonable officer do on the scene, of course, within state law and federal law. And I assume that this expert looked at all of that and came to that conclusion.
Mark, back in 2020, specifically with the Stavian Rodriguez case, 5 officers were put on administrative leave. Do you know their current employment status?
Well, they're all still employed, yes. So administrative leave means they're still employed by the department and by the city. And we'll see what, I've been in touch with several of them even this week and as recently as last night. I don't know what their future plans are, but I know it's been one heck of a ride for them.
They have been working with the police department in the meantime?
No, they've been employed by. So not doing any police work whatsoever, just employed by the police department.
And typically, what does that process look like once those charges are dropped and getting taken off administrative leave? Is that something that then the police department has to do a process with? Is there typically a timeline, or is it case by case and hard to say about that?
I would say it's probably the latter. We don't have a lot of officers charged with any types of crimes, certainly not ones involving use of force often at all. And so certainly there will be a training process. They've been without that stuff for 2 years, so they're going to have to make up all their training, those who wish to stay with the department, and then hopefully they all do. But yeah, it'll be a process based on the circumstances, and the department will probably do an administrative investigation if they haven't already. I know they generally do. Of course, there's the criminal side of things, the administrative side of things, so that wouldn't be surprising if they go that route either.
I know you mentioned that you talked with the officers as recent as this week. Can you talk about what the involvement with the union has been across the past couple of years? Do you get regular contact on a monthly basis or a weekly basis? Do you periodically check in with them? I mean, how does the union work with and represent officers who are on administrative leave and facing, charges and allegations such as the ones that were dropped today?
Yeah, sure. We've been in touch with some in a different capacity or a more often timeline than others, but showing support for them since the date of these incidents. We've had meetings and gatherings here at the lodge to show support for them. And of course, I know the department, individuals in leadership on the department have been in touch with them. So yeah, we support them through this terribly difficult time. And of course, like I said in my statement, that these things are extremely, extremely difficult. And I don't want to lessen the impact, of course, that's been on these families. It's horrible that these things happened, but it's also horrible that the officers were put in these situations to have to make these decisions. It's part of the responsibility that we take when we take the oath and put on the badge and the gun. But now they've been having to deal with not just the tragedy and the incident itself, but I mean, facing multiple years potentially in jail is, you can imagine, quite stressful. So we've been supporting them through that journey as well.
Mark, can you elaborate on that a little bit? What are officers trained to do in these scenarios, and why is it such a hard scenario to be in for them?
Well, you've got 3 different scenarios, so it'd be hard for me to, they're all very different. But at the end of the day, and I heard the district attorney say this when she said she talks to young people. Obey commands, do what you're told, and the likelihood of a horrible outcome, she didn't say this, of course, but where it's important to obey an officer's commands and you can deal with whether there was an issue with it or not afterward. The likelihood of something tragic happening, if those things are followed, it's almost, they're slim to none. And so, every time there's a critical incident, the department, they take a step back, they debrief the officers, they debrief supervisors to find out how we can always do things better. And I have no doubt, well, I know it happened in all of these, or both of the scenarios in Oklahoma City, and I'm sure it did in the Village as well. So we're always learning and evolving of how we can keep ourselves from having to be in these situations. But at the end of the day, police work is police work, and we're dealing with felony incidents and individuals who weren't obeying officers' commands. And the decisions were made, and as we said from day one, we felt that the officers followed their training. If they felt threatened or felt that deadly force was necessary, that they were justified in using it.
Just like with anything, I'm sure that there's some people who don't agree with the decisions that have been made, and I'm sure there's a lot of lay people out there who, on one end, don't understand the police work, on the other end, don't understand fully the judicial system and the context and the way that the evidence was presented and analyzed and everything. So for people who don't understand or get the rationale of what happened today, and still disagree and don't appreciate that, what's your message to them?
That's a great question. I think that the police officers in Oklahoma City, I've been on for 22 years, and the dates range from the officers that are involved in these, as well. But the department as a whole for decades, and my entire time on this department, and certainly before that, has worked very, very diligently at having a relationship and having communication with all residents in this city. And it's important that elected leaders, that public officials stand behind the law. I thought the DA's comments were unbelievably profound, and she wasn't here to she even commented on police policy, but to give a legal analysis on what the law says. And that's what we're trained on as police officers, is how do we act within the law and continue to do our job of providing public safety to this community. So for those who disagree with it, that doesn't surprise me. I mean, there's very few things that any of us disagree on unanimously in about anything in life right now. So I think being respectful of the process at which the decision was made is important. And then as we go together, we move forward together, continuing to provide public safety to this community. It's a two-way street. We can't do it without support from the community, which includes some understanding of what it's like, even though it's not completely possible, but of what police work really is and what it entails.
Last thing from me, did the FOP have any role in this investigation, or was it completely independent?
We did not. I mean, we pay for the expenses of the legal advice and counsel that our officers get, but we're not involved in any of the investigation. And I'll make it very clear, we have had no contact with the DA's office since the election night, mostly for this very reason. We didn't want there to be any appearance of any type of impropriety. So, her decision, she arrived at completely free from the FOP's communication, involvement. We didn't exchange niceties at Christmas and New Year's and all that stuff. So it was, we were not involved in the investigation or any of the decision made by the DA.
Among all the officers that are, represented within the union, do you, as, the president of that union, hear things from them during these processes about, do you have an update to share with us, or we're concerned, or we'd like to see a certain result one way or the other? Do you feel like they get involved in these things, or they also tend to sit and wait it out and watch what happens?
Yeah, so of course I'd be very careful to share any type of communication that we have with our members about those things, but I can tell you generally, sure, they're interested. It's because it affects indirectly them and how they do their job. If you do your job according to what you believe the way you're trained, but then someone else comes along with the authority to prosecute you and say you broke a law, and we got into this in the race prior to the election, just, hey, this is what our training is. If you think the training is against the law, or it's not within the bounds of the law, then somebody needs to let the department know. That hadn't happened, of course, up until then. So from that perspective, yeah, I think they're interested in it, but they with social media and the way things are, they can stay updated on the happenings of these cases probably quicker than we could get something out to them in a lot of instances.
Do you know if there are any conversations planned with just community members or community groups in the wake of the decision, just about helping people, again, as I mentioned, come to terms with it, understand
I can't speak to what the DA's office does, and I know, though I can't get into the details, because I don't know every detail of how the department works with them. We have been part of community groups, we'll continue to be. There aren't any plans, we didn't know about this decision until today. So there aren't any plans as of right this moment to do that, but certainly we're open to conversations and sit-downs and anything we can to have a better relationship and a continued good relationship with our community. All right, thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.